Running Away from Myself by Dmitri Fantski. To one Wisam, who was busy finding the best Thai food while I was busy running away from myself. We both found exactly what we were looking for in every city. It's very hard to understand in the beginning that the whole idea is not to beat the other runners. Eventually, you learn that the competition is against the little voice inside you that wants you to quit. George Sheehan. Preface. I often find myself locked in an internal conversation, asking the same question over and over. Why am I running? There was a period where the answer did not matter. I simply did it compulsively. I ran until the question faded into the rhythm of my footsteps. I spent countless hours in the biting cold, chasing a horizon that always seemed to move further away. My girlfriend would watch me leave and return, her face a complex map of incomprehension and pride. She did not always understand the why, but she respected the how. Lately, I found I had lost my appetite for writing. The words felt heavy, or perhaps they felt like they were not enough. To break that silence, I pushed myself to put down a few thoughts about the miles I have covered. That is when the idea took root. I wanted to explain this journey, not just to others, but to myself. English is not my first language, and finding the right resonance for these feelings took time. But I realized that my journey, while deeply personal, is not exceptional. Many of us are running towards something, or perhaps running away from ourselves. We share the same blisters, the same exhaustion, and the same quiet victories. If sharing these pages helps even one person feel less alone in their struggle, I will consider my mission accomplished. Prologue. It is the 5th of August, 5 p.m., near Lisbon. The heat is stifling, around 30 degrees Celsius. I am here for a workshop for a couple of days. Today's session was very intense. We covered a lot of ground. They explained to us how the future of planning will look like. I am drained, but I am lacing up my shoes for a run before dinner. The first kilometer feels great. A bit of wind is coming to balance the strong sun's rays. It feels good because there is an elevation loss, but all runners know this. If you descend, you will need to come back up later. It does not bother me for now, so I am going strong, hitting some fast pace, less than 4:30 per kilometer. A quick look at my Garmin watch does confirm that I am going strong. I feel it. I also feel my heart rate skyrocketing, and my watch confirms this too. Each step hits the ground like a boxer hits his heavy bag. Left, right, I move forward. I have paused the music so I can hear my surroundings. I hear the cars. There is a lot of traffic. It looks like I am near a highway. The smell of the warm asphalt is another detail confirming my assumption. I hit now the 2nd-kilometer mark. The heart rate is still high, but I need to keep going. I am barely at halfway. And to get back to my hotel, there is no other option than completing this big loop. Halfway done. The sun grows stronger, or at least it feels so. It is incredibly hot. I feel like 50 degrees now. This is the perfect run to build up my heat endurance. My breathing is heavy. I am running past a gate behind of which there is a massive dog who would like to have a taste of my firm calf. This is a nice motivation to keep running, even if the body says, "No, I am too tired." You would not want to have a dog following your path to bite you, would you? Less than a kilometer to go. But this is where it gets brutal. That elevation loss turns into a gain now. A gain for God knows who. I have to stop. My heart rate hits 190 beats per minute, and I feel it pumping like there is no tomorrow. I alternate between light jogging and walking now. My muscles are not hurting, surprisingly, but I am sweating like polar bear in a sauna. I can taste the salt from the sweat on my lips. In the days when my blood was more alcohol than water, I would have called an ambulance, thinking that I am having a heart attack. I have worked a lot on controlling and understanding my feelings, but the fear still lingers. I see the hotel standing tall in front of me. That is the sign that I did it. I completed my 6 kilometers run, one of the toughest. But hey, there are only a very few things more satisfying than completing a tough run. Back to my room, red enough to turn a bull mad, I am trying to cool down using the air conditioning. I have half an hour to get ready before dinner. I am spending it showering, and while I am proud of myself for a new activity on Strava, I am also fighting my demons, who are whispering, "Look at that exacerbated vein on your forehead. It looks like you are about to have a stroke." This is now done. However, there is no finish line. Tomorrow waits with its share of new adventures. It feels easy now, but it was not always like this. There was a time when I had to be threatened to go for a run, when the thought of daily running seemed impossible. Chapter 1. There was a time I remember being teenager, fascinated by those beautiful people in movies, on the internet, and in advertisements. Everywhere I looked, I saw guys with six-packs. I thought that this was the norm. I started going to the gym. I had no program, I had no gym buddy, I had no coach, but I was full of motivation. I felt invincible, like all teenagers do. I did not exactly have a healthy lifestyle back then. I drank everything that contained ethanol, kept no regular sleeping hours, and as far as I can remember, I never declined a single party invitation. Yet, one thing remained constant. I always showed up at the gym, early in the morning. Even if I had gone to bed just a few hours prior, I was there. My workout routine began to show progress. I saw my body changing, and it was really great to see the hard work paying off. It stayed like this for years. It was not that I was bored of strength training, but I wanted to include some cardio in my program as well. I was in my early 20s when I first stepped on a treadmill. I was terrified of falling. All those gadgets that exist today were not that widespread then, but I had a fitness tracker that was showing me some numbers that I did not yet understand. I started slowly, progressively increasing the pace. It felt really good. I had no notion of running posture or technique. I had no idea if I was doing it right or wrong. I just ran. Eventually, I grew curious about repeating the same exercise over and over. I started racing against myself, trying to beat each time my personal best. Once I felt comfortable enough, from treadmill I shifted to outdoor running. It felt different, but I enjoyed it as much. I had a few friends, but most of them were my drinking friends, so I did not really dare ask them to join me for a run. I was exclusively a solo runner. I saw good progress very fast. Even though I was smoking like lung cancer was a myth, my fitness level improved rapidly. I felt it. I felt feeling better when climbing 4 or 5 floors to get to work. I felt it when I had to sprint to catch the metro or the tramway. But like many things in life, the initial excitement began to vanish. I was still motivated, but things were adding up, and I was less assiduous in my working routines. Progressively, I skipped my workout for a day, then for a few days, then for a week and more. Sometimes I only remembered running when I saw my shoes sitting in a corner, gathering dust. I was young, and the only things that mattered were the girls, the parties, and FC Barcelona winning as many Champions League titles as possible. I was losing focus. Looking back, I am surprised I did not injure myself, given my bad habits. I was a student, doing internships to finish my master's degree. The amount of work was relentless. I was at work 3 days a week, from Monday to Wednesday, and in school for the rest. Sometimes we even had classes on Saturday morning. It left me with little time for training, at least not as much as I would have wanted. But maybe those were just excuses. My relationships were like my runs, sporadic. I was unstable and did not know what exactly I wanted. I was terrified of commitment. On top of it all, I had some family issues that heavily impacted my mental health. But I had a solution that always solved every single thing: getting wasted. My drinking habits were becoming alarming. It did not bother me to open a beer in front of a football match that I was watching alone. When partying, the limit never applied to me. I always had one too many. This went on for years. On the surface, I thought I was happy. I did not even know what anxiety meant. Sadness? Yeah, sure, but nothing a glass of Nika whiskey could not solve. Or so I thought. The frustrations were, however, accumulating. On the days I did not wake up with a massive hangover, I was furious about having to go to work. It was not the job, it was the city. Paris was eating me alive. I kept going. I'm not a quitter, resonating in my head. But I was reaching a breaking point. Something did not feel right. I could not really point what. That was not such a big deal. A couple of tequila shots helped me forget about this feeling for a few days at least. Then, France entered a state of constant emergency. High alert for terrorism. The major attacks. Charlie Hebdo, Bataclan. This left an invisible scar on me. I started to feel deeply unsafe, and the yellow jackets were around the corner. It was hectic. Every weekend, they were striking. Or better to say that it felt like they were burning Paris down. I just could not take it anymore. And after spending 20 years of my life in the Paris area, I decided to quit my job that I loved and leave France behind. I needed an international experience. I needed to breathe. After a 6-month break, I settled in Prague. Everything seemed so perfect. The joy of the pints of beer at 50 Czech korunas, around €2. This felt like heaven. The quality of life was incredible. Great public transportation, clean and extremely safe city, a lot of nature everywhere. It was mid-2019 when I moved. I was working for a big American corporate that had finance functions in Prague. Oh boy, everything was so different from what I knew. The first few months were very helpful for me as I had to improve my English. I had a strong knowledge of French accounting, and I was a great asset for the team. I made friends, started drinking regularly, again. Not that I really stopped, but having colleagues who always wanted to go for a beer, and I still had not learned how to say no. Also, the cigarettes were very cheap compared to France. I had quit smoking for a few months, but I started again, thinking, why shouldn't I allow myself this pleasure when it is so cheap? Everything was great. And then, early 2020, the news were referring to a strange virus from China, very chaotic, and a lot of misinformation led the first lockdown. I was terrified, again, but not for the same reasons as in Paris. To make matters worse, my landlady decided to not renew my lease. I had to find a new home, in the middle of a global pandemic. This was really tough, but shortly after, I met Wanwei, and she came to balance all the craziness that life laid before me. Everything went so fast. It was a new era. QR codes, vaccines, FFP2 masks. This definitely did not help improve my mental health. Wanwei got to Prague as a Thai chef in a restaurant near the Old Town Square, and we started chatting online before meeting in person. We got to know each other's very quick, and this helped us getting closer and go through the pandemic together. For once, life seemed to have some sort of good news for me. This was only a trick. Life is vicious. Stress piled up at work and at home. Personal problems, family issues, sickness. All those things were coming in waves. 1V was my rock, and I was less of a drinker, but I still was. Whenever I had a bad day at work, I poured a glass or two of red wine. Whenever the temperature was reaching 25 or 26 degrees, I had to get a fresh beer to cool myself down. I was extremely talented to find some good reason for having a drink. Prague. New city also meant new activities. I have discovered new running routes in some nice parks around the city. The first year in Prague, I was living near Divoka Sarka, a quiet, uncrowded paradise. Later, I moved to Žižkov. Very quickly, I have settled with new running routes. In between, I have changed job, and my office was in Prague 5. I had the chance to be able sometime to go for a run during lunchtime. This was all so great. Life went on like this for years. I had some good days and some bad days. The bad ones were never really noticeable as I numbed them with ethanol. It did not feel like this at the time, but I was on the edge of something that would change me forever. Chapter 2. Catch me if you can. Nothing really prepares you for the arrival of real life. I mean, there is no real transition from childhood and adulthood. The adulthood seems to be the destination, but you reach it in a blink of an eye. One day you are young, fueled by a seemingly infinite well of energy and the belief that your body is invincible. Then, in what feels like the very next minute, you wake up with the distinct sensation that a tram has hit you in your sleep. It starts with the small things, a small but noticeable back pain, noticeable enough to make tying your shoes feel like a feat of strength. And soon enough, you notice some knees discomfort. Again, nothing really serious, but you do hear this strange clicking when you climb the stairs. You also start to see more and more digestive problems. The food that you love so much is not welcomed anymore into your belly. And those are only the physical symptoms, an unspoken way for your body to tell you enough. It is the crushing realization that the adult things which seem so glamorous when you were 10 years old, such as having a career, a home, a partner, are actually a relentless cycle of maintenance. Being productive at work, showing up for children, being the perfect partner, ensuring the electricity is not cut off, and paying the rent on time. These responsibilities are the Achilles heel of modern society, and I was carrying them all like Atlas was carrying the world on his shoulders. On the surface, I dealt with those things pretty well. At least, I thought I was dealing with them well. I was a nobody, and I wanted to be somebody. I had a secret. I was always operating at 200% capacity at all times. I was not just an employee. I was the one who left the last the office and who was obsessed over every comma in a report. I was not just a boyfriend, I was a performer, always trying to anticipate any need, always trying to make the extra step to make her happy. I was a people pleaser with an intense fear of rejection. I was a perfectionist and was petrified that my imposter mask will fall off. I put a lot of pressure on myself, even though nobody really asked me to be perfect. No one seemed to care as much as I did, yet I just could not stop. I was running a marathon of expectations long before I ever laced up a pair of running shoes. It was the year 2023. That year felt like it was written by Stephen King. First, there was a good news. My brother was getting married. For us, for my family, this was the apotheosis of a life made of ups, but also a lot of downs. But God had other plans for him. Just months before he was meant to walk down the aisle, his health took an unpleasant turn. Suddenly the wedding bells were drowned out by the beeping sounds of hospital corridors and the doctors talking of heavy treatments. I had to fly to Paris to do some medical testing. There was a chance I could be a potential bone marrow donor for my brother. I still remember the smell of antiseptic, the sharp pinch of needles, the blood leaving my body, and this loud silence of waiting rooms. I had mixed emotions, the literal fear for my brother's life and the silent pressure of being his potential savior. But of course, I told everyone I was fine. I did not want to bother anyone with the fact that I was drowning. I took those feelings, the fear, the exhaustion, and I buried them so deep I thought they would never see the light of day. Meanwhile, Wanvi decided to take a half-year break in Australia. She had her working holiday visa approved and she wanted to make the most of it. It was, of course, a very exciting news and an amazing opportunity. I really supported her into this project at 100%. But for an anxious mind, this was a quiet hell, although I did not know it then. I celebrated my 33rd birthday in France with my family. For someone who spends his life trying to be seen as successful, but hates being the center of attention, the day was a nightmare of social performance. I sat at the table, smiling and nodding, while my brain was a whirlwind of Sydney time zones, bone marrow biopsy results, and the feeling that I was losing control of everything. Not long after, Wanvi flew to Sydney. I decided to join her for a few weeks to combine remote work and holiday. I packed my suitcase, my working laptop, and my anxiety. I did not know it then, but this was the beginning of something I never saw coming. Chapter 3. Oz. Wanvi departed for Sydney not long after my birthday in late October. The house was missing something, I could feel it. I had mixed feelings of excitement for her adventure and sadness because I knew that it would be hard. I knew I would miss her every day. But in a healthy relationship, concessions are the foundation. I also knew how vital this journey was for her spirit, so I put my loneliness away and redirected my thoughts on the date of my own departure. Not long after, around mid-November, it was my turn. I boarded the flight that would bring me very far away from Prague, on the other side of the world. It was the longest flight of my life, a marathon of recycled air and cramped legs. The layover in Dubai was a blur of intense lights and luxury duty-free shops. In other words, it was not really my cup of tea, but the serious test was from Dubai to Sydney. 12 hours. 12 hours of being suspended at around 10,000 meters in a metal tube over the ocean. Of course, I tried to medicate the boredom and anxiety with airplane alcohol, hoping to black out into sleep. But my mind just would not shut off. I managed only a few hours of poor sleep, waking up with a dry mouth and a heavy head. After landing, it was late evening, but I could still feel the warm weather. Getting there from Prague, where it was around 0 degrees Celsius, exhausted from the trip, my body seemed to hit a physical wall. I followed Wanvi's directions to a specific train stop, dragging my luggage like a prisoner carrying his soul to the guillotine. When I finally saw her waiting for me at the station, the exhaustion vanished for a split second. It felt like being born a second time, emerging from a dark, cold tunnel into the light and warmth of her smile. She had worked her ass off before I even arrived. Sydney's real estate market was, and still is, a nightmare of soaring prices, but she had managed to get a room in a shared apartment, so I would not have to burn my half of my savings on an overpriced hotel room. Because I was working remotely for my company back in Europe, I needed more than just a bed. I needed a proper place where I could work, a desk, and a proper chair where I could sit more than 8 hours a day. Seeing the effort she put into making a home for us made me so proud, but it also planted the first seeds of a guilt that would soon grow out of control. The first few days were a bit unreal, like one of those dreams that one might have when taking hallucinogenic mushrooms. The jet lag distorted my perception of the world, making it appear tilted. Sydney is an amazing megapolis, a dream destination for millions of people, but to me, it felt overwhelming. I looked up at the massive skyscrapers that seemed to block out the view of the sky for us, for the people down here, on the ground. On the surface, everyone was friendly, and the G'day mate culture was genuine. However, beneath the surface, I could sense a frantic, high-pressure pulse. The city felt like a machine, and everyone in it was a gear turning under the stress of survival. I felt incredibly lost. I was reunited with my love, yes, but I was geographically and emotionally away. I was thousands of kilometers from everything I knew. I tried to convince myself it was just the tiredness, a temporary side effect of crossing time zones, and that soon I would feel better. Days went on, an unpleasant routine set in. Because of the important time difference with Europe, my schedule was flipped. I spent most of my mornings wandering in Sydney with no purpose. Yeah, sure, I was sightseeing, but those beautiful scenery did not really print into my memory. And then, in the afternoons, I start my workday. I had to continue late into the night to sync with my European colleagues, while I sat behind a laptop, writing some working instructions, or having another team meeting that could have been an email. Wanvi was a force of nature. She was putting in so much effort, often working 3 shifts at once to help us get by and pay the rent for our small room in this shared apartment. Every time she headed out for work, I felt a little down about it. Even though I had a stable, full-time remote job, she was the one putting in the extra effort to make our life there as good as possible. I had this odd feeling that the city was consuming me. I would go for a walk and look at the 8 to 5 commuters, and they looked like some sort of robots to me. Soulless, driven by a clock I simply did not understand. But maybe I was the one losing my soul. To cope with the isolation and the strange working hours, I fell back into old dangerous habits. I quickly learned the local rules. In Europe, you grab a bottle of wine with your groceries. Not here. I discovered the bottle-o, the alcohol shops that stood next to the supermarkets. It goes without saying that to my clouded mind, finding one near our apartment felt like a sign straight sent from God. Back to square one I was, because my work did not start until the afternoon. My morning felt like a void that needed filling. I began having breakfast with a cold, fresh beer. That felt really good, especially in that warm weather. By lunch, I would move on to some cheap wine. It kinda numbed the guilt of watching Wanvi work so hard. It numbed the loneliness of being a stranger in a strange land. For a few days, it felt really good. Soon, it felt like a slow suicide. I also tried to have my legs moving at the same time, so I went for a few runs along the Sydney harbour, and for a moment, the beauty would break through the fog. The scenery was totally amazing. I was running near the ocean, with the sound of the waves crashing against the rocks, and with the opera house in the distance. Yes, amazing. But the Australian sun is a different beast. It does not just warm you, it bites. Even in the early hours, the UV rays felt like they were piercing my skin. I was not ready for it. I have to say that I look like a vampire. I am as pale as a ghost. So this sun beast was a big deal for me. I would return from those runs, exhausted, sun-scorched, and more depleted than when I started. The runs gave me glimpses of clarity, but my mind was too heavy to hold on to them. I was running through paradise, but I was carrying a hell inside me. Something was fundamentally wrong, and no amount of scenery could mask the fact that I was drifting further and further away from the man I wanted to be. Chapter 4. Break the Unbreakable. It was just another day, in Sydney, on the other side of the world. I had finished a meeting and switched to Outlook to catch up on my emails when, suddenly, something snapped. It was as if the floor was vanishing beneath my feet. My chest began to hurt, like a crushing weight, as if a bodybuilder were compressing me to the point of implosion. Breath became a luxury. My throat tightened. An invisible hand was choking me. Here we go, I thought. I'm having a heart attack. The sensation was so vivid that I could not think of something else. I stood up from the improvised desk where I was working, and I stumbled onto the balcony for fresh air. Fresh was a relative term in Sydney in December, the peak of the southern hemisphere's summer. I started shaking. My hands were numb. I was losing it. I tried to take deep breaths, but it only led to hyperventilation. I was terrified and utterly alone. Wanvi was at work. Boy, I am going to die on the other side of the world, and I will leave such a mess for Wanvi. This was the first thing that I could think of. I had to do something. I went back inside the room and lay on the bed, staring at the ceiling. I could hear my heart racing. My mind was a storm of negativity. I cannot say for sure how long this lasted. It felt like hours, though I am pretty sure it was only a few minutes top. When that first wave vanished, I felt something totally new to me: powerlessness. For a control freak, losing grip of my own body and my own mind was the ultimate horror. When Wanvi finally got back home, I did not want to alarm her, so I tried to play it cool. I waited until she was settled before telling her. She was incredibly supportive, masking her own fear to be the anchor I needed, but the fear did not leave. It just changed shape. I became afraid to death of the feeling returning. My mind began jumping from a worst-case scenario to another. What if you die right now? What if you lose control and jump from the balcony? What if you go crazy and hurt Wanvi or the flatmates? It was terrifying. The fact that I was not able to control the situation, to control my feelings, put a question mark over my whole life, over my whole ability to handle things, over my entire identity. The voices in my head were way too loud and did not let me sleep. I tried to drown them out with music, podcasts, and meditation programs, but this did not really silence them. It just made it worse. It only amplified the internal chaos. I eventually managed a few hours of fragmented sleep. Needless to say that the following day would be an uphill battle. Wanvi wanted to cancel her morning shift to stay with me, but I insisted not to. Not long after she left, the taps on the shoulder began again. Of course, I did what anyone in this century does. I googled my symptoms. I was right. I did survive a heart attack. Oh, wait. Or maybe was it a stroke? No, maybe it was something else. Anyway, I was caught in a feedback loop, each thought darker than the last. I always thought that these things happened to other people. They could not affect me. I thought, a mentally strong guy like me is immune to this. Oh boy, how wrong I was. It came gradually, but I had to admit that I needed help. But how? I was in the middle of nowhere, far from everything I knew until then, far from my family, far from my home. I really felt lost. The thoughts were getting darker and darker. Maybe you can end all of this, an easy way out. That scared me more than the chest pain. Finally, I have decided to check online to get some help. I reached out to a suicide hotline. Because I could barely find my voice, I texted them. They helped me understand that this was not a death sentence. It was a panic attack born from years of built-up stress and untreated anxiety. A cocktail that tastes truly bad. A new world unfolded. I had to learn. I had to understand. I became a student of my own fear. I was constantly scanning my body. Is that knee pain a running injury or something worse? What was very disturbing, and I had hard time to accept, was that a mind problem could cause such violent physical symptoms. The chest pain was there, and this constricted throat felt too real to be just in my head. Eventually, by learning what was happening to me, it became manageable at times. At first, for just minutes, then hours. I tried to protect myself from triggers, but I quickly realized that isolation was not the answer. I can't stop living because I'm afraid. I decided to fight back. I decided to run. The first run into this new world was memorable. I was too scared to run outside because I was certain that I would drop dead in the middle of Sydney Harbour. I still wanted to prove my anxiety wrong, to prove that I will not stop running because of it. I went to the gym and stepped on the treadmill. The pace was very slow, but my heart rate was skyrocketing. Each single step felt like a step toward my grave, but I kept running, I kept going. I was, of course, trying to distract myself from my negative thoughts by watching some old movie, probably a Bergman, or maybe it was a Kurosawa. I cannot really remember. I could not focus on the movie. The unpleasant feeling was too intense. I mentally rolled the dice. Let's keep going. Let's see. Am I going to die? For sure, but maybe not today. I ran 4 kilometers. I was exhausted like I never was. I felt terrible, but I did it. I fought back. This was not a victory. I had won the first battle of a very long war. One thing I intentionally did not mention during this crisis: alcohol. Of course, after a long time drinking, alcohol was my go-to thing when I felt down, when I felt bad, when I felt sad, when I felt happy, when I felt... During the crisis, it was not an exception. I did try to fight back anxiety, stress, and my morbid thoughts by numbing them with a fresh beer, but only to realize that this was like pouring gasoline on a fire. Chapter 5. No, thanks. There was a time when alcohol existed only in the glasses of the adults around me. Believe it or not, I was only 2 years old the first time I was dead drunk. My parents had gone to church and left my older brother to babysit me. He was just a kid himself, and he thought it would be funny to give me some red wine to drink. A sip, maybe 2. When my parents returned from the service, they found my brother crying on the stairs in a panic. Me? I was fast asleep under the table, blissfully unaware of the headache waiting for me. But the first time I drank consciously came soon enough. I was not much older, maybe 13 or 14, at one of my many cousins' birthday parties. Same kid, same poison, the blood of Christ. Trying to impress the older boys, I tilted back a bottle and managed to finish more than a third of it. It is not necessary to describe the outcome in detail. It was bad, bad enough that even now, more than 20 years later, The memory of that night carries a special place in my soul. Since then, oh boy, I have drunk my share of cirrhosis. For years, the idea of quitting never even crossed my mind. It was simply the background noise of my life, the static that made everything else tolerable. But then came that hot and heavy day in Sydney. I was no longer a young man. I was sitting there, overwhelmed with an anxiety so thick I could taste it, feeling truly lost in my own skin. I reached for a fresh cold beer, ready to twist the cap and drown the noise. Then something unexpected happened. I decided not to open it. I looked at the condensation on the can and actually thought, this sweet cold beer, I can skip it. It felt like a glitch in my own programming. The next morning, after another night of barely existent sleep, I stared at myself in the mirror. My bones felt filled with leaden anxiety. I looked like a modern zombie. This zombie, I whispered to my reflection, is never going to touch a sip of alcohol again. At first, the resolution felt like a joke, a desperate punchline to the crisis I was living through. But the days began to stack up. 1, then 5, then 14, until I marked my first full month of sobriety. And oh boy, that was something. It was a strange, unsettling feeling. To be clear, the anxiety did not vanish. It often took over entirely. But I kept going. 1 month bled into 2. And with it came a quiet, alien sense of satisfaction. The downside, however, was the silence in my social life. My friends started feeling further and further away. There is a common saying that people who do not drink are boring. I will be the first to admit it. It is true, or at least it feels true when you are the only one sober at the table. At first, my friends living abroad did not even believe me. They waited for the inevitable relapse, but here I was, 2 months clean, then 3, then 6. After a while, the sobriety became a streak that I did not want to break. To fill the void left by the drinking, I needed to keep my hands and my mind busy. I was not necessarily scared of drinking again. I was scared of the thoughts that surfaced when I was still. I needed to drown out the racing internal monologue. So I ran. I ran every single day. It did not matter how I felt or what the weather was doing. I laced up my shoes and went outside. If I could not face the world, I got on a treadmill. The only thing that mattered was the odometer, adding kilometers to the total, proof that I was moving away from the person I used to be. It became addictive. I traded the bottle for endorphin shots. Soon, I noticed a dark pattern. If I consciously decided to take a rest day, I could not find any peace. I would pace the house, restless and irritable. My salvation was starting to become its own kind of poison. Then, I understood that I had to learn the hardest lesson of all, how to let go. I had never considered letting go as an option. To me, letting go was synonymous with failing, giving up. But as I struggled with the compulsion to run myself into the ground, I realized that letting go is actually a strength that very few people possess. It requires more courage to stop than it does to keep pushing when you are broken. Time was flying, and I felt like I was racing against it. Each step hitting the pavement made me feel stronger, though not physically. On the contrary, my body was falling apart. Knee pain, hip issues, lower back discomfort. The list of ailments grew with every mile. But mentally, I was hardening. It did not feel like strength at first. Most of my runs were plagued by a chorus of doubts. I'm no good at this. Or, you're going to give yourself a heart attack. But eventually, I realized the doubts were just part of the process. I had to accept those thoughts, acknowledge them, and then let them drift away. This felt like a revelation. I stopped fighting the pain and the fear. I started saying to the universe, come and hit me hard enough that I hit the ground. Leave me for dead, because I knew then that I would rise like a phoenix. I might not come back stronger, but I would definitely come back more resilient. Chapter 6. Rituals. My need for control did not vanish, If anything, running amplified it. I still had to feel in charge of my world, even as the world around me felt increasingly chaotic. To ground myself, I implemented rituals, sacred sequences of actions that turned this simple hobby into a devotional practice. It started long before my feet hit the pavement. It began with the way I laid out my clothes the night before, the shorts aligned with the shirt, the socks tucked into the shoes like small, waiting anchors. This was not just organization, it was a contract with my future self. There were days when my motivation was outside the Milky Way, drifting somewhere in a cold vacuum, but I had elevated running to the level of the gods. It was sacred. I treated my training plan like a holy text. If the plan said 10 kilometers, I did 10 kilometers, not 9.8, not 10.2. The precision gave me a sense of order that the rest of my life often lacked. I stopped giving myself the option to skip a workout. The negotiation phase, where you lie in bed arguing with your alarm clock, was eliminated. I only accepted three excuses: a real injury, a non negotiable professional deadline, or a critical life appointment. The I am too tired today was no longer a valid one. I was impressed by how quickly this discipline became second nature. I no longer had to fight myself to get out the door. The shift in perspective was subtle but profound. I did not have to run, I got to run. As work claimed the lion's share of my day, I had to be flexible with my schedule. My rituals had to be portable. There were seasons of early morning runs where the world was still blue and hushed, the streetlights of Prague still flickering against the fading stars. In those moments, my breath was the only sound in the air, a rhythmic puff of steam. There were lucky stretches where I could escape during lunchtime, the sun hitting its zenith and the city buzzing with a frantic energy that I felt I was bypassing. Then there were the evening runs, the most cathartic of all, where I used the miles to burn off the frustrations of the office, grinding my stress into the asphalt. The weather, however, was the one variable I could not control, only endure. I learned to embrace the bite of the frost that turned my nostrils numb, and the chaos of a summer storm that soaked me to the bone within seconds. There is a certain warrior feeling to running while it snows, the world muffled in white, your footsteps making a satisfying crunch on the fresh powder. But the heat was my kryptonite. On warmer days, I saw the true limits of my biology. My heart rate would hit the roof, ticking up like a countdown clock. My breath became a ragged struggle even at a snail's pace, and a heavy sense of discomfort would settle into my bones. I tried to build heat endurance, pushing through the humid air of July, but I eventually learned that every engine has a boiling point. I found mine under the summer sun, learning the humility that comes with being forced to walk when you desperately want to fly. My roots were my sanctuary. I was not an adventurer seeking new routes every morning. I was a pilgrim returning to the same shrines. To stay in control, I stuck to what I knew. There was the hilly loop around the office, framed by lush greenery that changed colors with the seasons. Then there was my home route, a 10-kilometer path I took almost daily before I moved closer to work. I never grew bored of it. I did not need a new view. I needed the familiarity of the old one so my mind could go elsewhere. I knew every crack in the pavement. I would step out of the building, turn left for 100 meters, then take a right onto Vinohradska. The 2-kilometer downhill stretch was a gift, a moment of pure joy where gravity did the heavy lifting. I could close my eyes and map every turn, every incline, and every tree in my mind. This was my mental palace. By removing the need to navigate, I freed my mind to reflect, solve problems, or simply exist. Finally, there was the matter of the gear. In my younger years, I could swear that all of this fuss around the importance of gears was just another marketing manipulation, a way to sell overpriced nylon and foam. But as the miles added up, the wisdom of age caught up with me. I learned the hard way that running is a mechanical process, and mechanics require the right tools. Run with overused shoes, and your knees will scream. Run in the wrong size, and your toenails will pay the price. A shirt that is too tight or a fabric that does not breathe can turn a beautiful run into a grueling test of irritation. I began tracking my shoes' mileage with the precision of an accountant, knowing that while the tread might look fine, the sole of the shoe, the cushioning, eventually dies. I moved past my brand loyalty and entered a phase of trial and error, testing new tech and different fits. The ultimate reward of this process was not just a better kit, it was that I finally learned to listen to my body. To be more precise, I heard the signs that my body was sending, but I did not always listen to them. Chapter 7. You've changed. My friends and my girlfriend kept repeating that I had changed. I hoped they were saying it in a good way. At the very least, leaning toward a healthier lifestyle had to be a positive thing. The first changes were not visible right away. For a few months, I was in and out of a cycle with antidepressants, and it was often hard to distinguish which wins were due to the medication and which I could actually take credit for. What struck me after a couple of weeks, however, was the sleep quality. I was sleeping 8 or even 9 hours straight without waking up. I would hit the ground running, full of energy. It felt miraculous. But it did not take long before I drifted back toward my old habits. I was sleeping relatively well. Yes, but I was awake for a significant part of the night. My racing thoughts were back at full blast. I forgot to send that important file to the finance director. Or what tie am I going to wear tomorrow? Most of these thoughts were absolutely absurd. I felt powerless because I could not control them. I just could not find the mute button. It was frustrating. Alongside psychotherapy, I finally accepted that sometimes being in control actually meant practicing acceptance. I accepted those thoughts. It was pointless to resist them. I learned to let them come and let them go. My psychotherapist helped immensely, yes. But I also had a lot of self-education. I started devouring podcasts and literature on mental health, specifically on anxiety. It was an eye-opener to realize that what I was feeling was not something so mysterious. It was well-mapped territory. This was the trigger for real change. I started to feel less anxious. Or more accurately, I learned to coexist with the anxiety. It was still there, peaking on certain days, but I learned to interact with it as little as possible. Obviously, it was not always easy. I had days where I was spiraling to the point of needing a Xanax or opening ChatGPT just to seek some digital reassurance. But I began to see those moments as temporary. After the storm, there is always a blue sky. I just had to wait long enough, patiently, for the beauty to return. There is a quote from the greatest show ever, The Sopranos, that resonated with me. There is no chemical solution to a spiritual problem. It had a strong impact because I was terrified of becoming addicted to medication. Of course, I took what was prescribed, mostly low-dose antidepressants, but I tried to avoid using anxiolytics for every minor tremor in my mood. My girlfriend was a pillar of strength in those moments. Her voice was the warm light I needed when the room felt too dark. It took some time, way too long, if you ask me, but eventually I was getting better. I did not always feel the progress in the moment, but when I took the time to reflect, I could see clear progress. Journaling kept me honest. And of course, running became my barometer. It helped me identify when I was in a good place and when I was in a darker one. All these small things combined to create a clearer mind. There were still days when I was lost in a total mist, an atmosphere straight out of Twin Peaks or Alan Wake, thick, damp, and heavy with things I could not see. But even then, I knew I just had to hold still and sit tight. This was just a phase. This too shall pass, my love would always say. And she was right, again. It did pass. Some phases were longer or stronger than others. Sometimes 30 minutes of intense anxiety felt like weeks of torture, leaving me completely drained. However, when the clouds finally parted to reveal the blue sky, the relief was amazing. Bit by bit, my confidence grew. Whatever challenge appeared in front of me, I told myself, I ran more than 100 kilometers last week. What can stop me? Running taught me to get used to discomfort, to let the pain settle in and then embrace it. The impact reached far beyond running. It taught me how to manage stress at work. When a month of tight deadlines approached, I felt my stress levels rise, but I now had the tools to face it. You realize that many aspects of life are like a long-distance run. In the beginning, you feel great, you feel indestructible, but then the doubts and pains start to pile up. You just have to keep going, putting one foot in front of the other. You do not always know what tomorrow looks like, but you have everything at hand, or should I say, at foot, to keep moving forward. Those new tools were my release valve. They would release stress and anxiety during intense days of quarter-end closings. If I had a 1-hour window, I would head out for a short run. It felt incredible. The body would tire, but the mind would finally find its peace. Chapter 8. It is more than just running. My girlfriend is a normal person. She does not run. Not that all runners are crazy, but there is undeniably something different about us. You either have the virus or you do not. It is incredibly difficult to explain to a non-runner why you would want to run 42.195 kilometers, why you would subject yourself to such intense pain, or why you would do that to your knees, hips, and legs. You are often left with blisters, black toenails, and chronic aches, so why do it? There is no easy answer, at least not a single one. You will get as many different answers as there are runners. The why is deeply personal. However, those answers often share common threads. You have likely seen the signs at races that say, running is cheaper than therapy. For me, that rings true. Running is a form of therapy, and the parallels are many. You do it to get better. You need commitment to see results. And while people say the work is done during the sessions, in running, the hardest work happens 10 minutes before the run, finding the motivation to get out the door, regardless of whether it is raining, snowing, or 30 degrees Celsius. When you sign up for your first official race and pay your $50, you are not necessarily doing it to win or even for the medal. You do it to stand on the same starting line as thousands of others who for a few hours will share the same pain, the same doubts, and the same immense joy of swallowing the kilometers that separate you from the finish line. Once you cross it, you have proven something to the world, but more importantly, you have proven to yourself that you can do it. Now, if you are ambitious, you will have days where you hit your goals and days where you do not. The latter are actually the most beneficial. Falling short should not be seen as a failure, but as a necessary step towards success. No one starts as a marathoner. It is only through consistency and discipline that the impossible becomes achievable. Running is also a form of meditation. It pulls you out of your wandering thoughts and anchors you in the present. When you run, you have to be present. Eventually, especially on long runs, your mind will try to drift, but you are quickly pulled back by the reality of the moment, perhaps by a nagging discomfort in your knee, or the rumbling of an empty stomach. Personally, I usually run with headphones, listening to music, podcasts, or the notifications from my smartwatch telling me my heart rate is too high or my pace is laughable. But on those long efforts, after 2 or 3 hours, the mind craves silence. When I switch the audio off, the real meditation begins. Every thought becomes incredibly loud. You enter a serious conversation with yourself, and the run transforms into a mental game. It becomes about finding the strength to ignore the protest of your muscles and navigating the strange loneliness of the road. After a certain distance, the world feels empty. It is difficult to explain. Even if you are running with a buddy, you are ultimately alone in your head. It sounds terrible, and in the moment, it is. But overcoming that mental wall is incredibly rewarding. You emerge stronger, mentally, not necessarily physically. Physically, you might get out of this with some black toenails. Overall, you learn to listen to your body and decode the signs it sends. You develop a wireless connection to your environment. The feel of fresh air on your face becomes a profound, simple pleasure. A light drizzle becomes an unexpected refreshment that helps you push further. In a world dominated by screens, sport is one of the few things we can still enjoy unplugged, unless you are on a treadmill watching an episode of The Wire. Your eyes become allies, connecting you to the world. You notice the architecture of the trees or details in your neighborhood you never saw before because you were too busy giving kudos on Strava or liking the last post of Kim Kardashian on Instagram. You discover the beauty of the world, the real world. I recently completed my first 50-kilometer run. Around kilometer 35, I started to sink. My mind turned against me, and I was ready to quit. What saved me? My vision. I noticed a beautiful white cat standing near a fence. I stopped, and he let me pet him. It lasted only 30 seconds, but it provided the mental reset I needed to keep pushing. And just like this, you find strength in simple things. You might think that you are done, but just look around. You might see some majestic tree on a route that you are often taking, but you never really paid attention to your surroundings. Simple things, always. Or it can also be something more personal, a thought for a loved one. And why not, even something more spiritual or religious? Jesus spent 6 hours on a wooden cross. Trust me, you can run for 6 hours. With time and consistency, you start to enjoy the process. The pain does not disappear. You just accept it as part of the deal. You do not fight it. You do not try to make it disappear. The dopamine and endorphins arrive to silence the ache, and you feel a rising sense of pride. It is you, just you, putting in the kilometers and doing the hard work. You take back control of yourself. Your gut becomes a trusted advisor, helping you decide when to push and when to rest. In my case, running replaced a miracle pill that was actually a poison, alcohol. I used to use alcohol to numb my feelings, but it never made them go away. Now, when life brings bad news, I go for a run and let the discomfort sink in. I embrace the pain with open arms and move through it. It is not enjoyable at all, but it is the only honest way to process struggle. You have to go straight through the center. If I could leave you with one piece of advice, it is this. Replace those binge drinking sessions with fartleks, sprints, or tempo runs. Why? Because there is no app that rewards you for drinking 15 shots of tequila, but run 15 kilometers, and you will find a world of people ready to give you kudos. Chapter 9. Solo or with the crew. Running is a solitary pursuit that somehow builds the most enduring bridges. It is one of those rare activities that creates an instant, wordless connection with total strangers. During most of my outdoor runs, I find myself playing a part in a silent choreography of nods and waves. When I pass another runner, I always make a small gesture with my hand, a thumb up, a two-finger salute, or a simple palm out. You could call it a cheer, or maybe it is a confession. It is a way of saying, I know the burning in your lungs, my friend. I am feeling it too. We are strangers sharing a specific rhythmic struggle. On these paths, I have observed the entire spectrum of the running world. The focused soloists with their caps pulled low, the chatty couples, the corporate colleagues trying to outpace each other, and the lifelong friends who seem to move as a single unit. For the vast majority of my journey, I have belonged to the first category. I run alone. This was not always a deliberate choice. Initially, it was a matter of logistics. Finding a running partner is like dating. You have to find someone with a matching pace, a compatible schedule, and a similar level of masochism. I tried to recruit colleagues, hoping for a lunchtime escape, but the stars rarely aligned. Eventually, I realized that my solitude was serving a purpose. Because I use running as a form of moving therapy, the solo miles are where the real work happens. It is me against myself. These runs are the ultimate laboratory for discipline. It is remarkably easy to lace up your shoes when a friend is knocking at your door, waiting in the cold. You go because you do not want to let them down. But when you are alone and the sky is a bruised gray, you have to fight 1,000 tiny excuses whispering in your ear. Those solitary runs are the ones that build the mental calluses necessary for growth. They teach you that you are enough to keep yourself going. However, running has undergone a massive cultural shift. You only have to open Strava to see that the lonely long-distance runner is being replaced by a vibrant social phenomenon. Running clubs are exploding in every city, turning 30 minutes of physical exertion into a social centerpiece. Bringing this community aspect into the sport has been a revelation for me. About 6 months ago, I decided to test the waters with a local group in Prague, the Prague Running Crew. I had seen them every Saturday during my own long runs along the Troja path. For a long time, I just watched from the sidelines. My social anxiety acted as a high fence. The idea of inserting myself into a pack of strangers was more daunting than a 20-kilometer uphill sprint. The first few times I joined, the anxiety nearly ruined the experience. My heart rate would spike before I even started moving. Not from the effort, but from the stress of small talk and the fear of not fitting in. But slowly, the rhythm of the group began to soothe the noise in my head. I realized a fundamental truth. Even in a crowd of 100, the physical work is still yours alone. The people running beside you are not critics, they are witnesses. They are simply sharing a slice of life, a brief window of shared effort in an otherwise busy week. The scale of this Prague community is staggering. On peak Saturdays, we have seen over 100 people gather. I have seen us turn out in force when the thermometer hit 25 degrees at 9 a.m., and I have seen us huddled together in the driving rain, our shoes squelching in unison. There is a strange, beautiful power in the collective yes we give to the elements. Because the group is so large, it functions like a living organism with different speeds. There are pace groups for everyone, from the weekend warriors to the sub 4-minute machines. You choose the pocket that fits your mood and your legs that day. The magic, however, usually happens after the watches are paused. We gather at a local cafe, a sweaty, exhilarated mass of people taking over the tables. The conversation shifts from split times and heart rates to life, food, and travel. Those Saturday mornings have transformed from a chore into a ritual, a cornerstone of my week. No matter where you find yourself, I encourage you to seek out your local crew. The solo runs will give you your strength, but the group will give you your why. You will not regret stepping out of your own head and into the pack. Chapter 10: Crossing the Finish Line. Where am I today? If I look in the mirror, the reflection is familiar, yet the person behind the eyes has shifted. I am a world away from the version of myself who started this journey a few years ago. People often ask if the running cured me. They want to know, am I still anxious? Of course I am. Do I still struggle with stress? Not a single day goes by without a deadline, a doubt, or a reason to feel the weight of the world. The chaos has not disappeared, but my relationship with it has. I have replaced a frantic reaction with a rhythmic action. In my past life, when the walls closed in, I had a predictable ritual. I would pour a glass of red wine, then a second, then a third, hoping the warmth would blur the sharp edges of my thoughts. I was looking for a magic trapdoor to escape my own mind, but the escape was always alone with high interest. The next morning, the anxiety was always there, waiting at the foot of the bed. Now, if I feel down, I do not reach for the corkscrew. I just sit with it. I let the feeling breathe. I acknowledge its presence, and I try to let it go. And eventually, I go for a run. Some days, the run is a gift, an effortless glide through the neighborhood where everything feels aligned. Other days, it feels terrible. My legs feel like lead, and my mind tries to talk me into turning back after the first kilometer. But I have learned that the bad runs are often the most important. They are the sessions where I learn that I can endure discomfort without breaking. Running has taught me to be resilient, because running is a mirror for life itself. At the beginning of a race or a new venture, you feel good, invincible even. You are fueled by the novelty and the adrenaline. But then, as you push through the effort, the doubt creeps in. The hill looks steeper, the path longer. It gets harder and harder until you are sure you cannot take another step, but you do. You find a new state of being, a quiet, steady equilibrium. You realize you do not need to be fast. You just need to be relentless, one step after another. That is the only way anyone ever gets anywhere. To those of you still caught in the cycle of one more drink with friends, I challenge you to set that beer aside. Replace it with a long Saturday morning run together. When you run with someone, the performance of social life drops away. There is no loud music to shout over, no ego to maintain. You share a rhythmic silence and a physical struggle that no words can truly explain. You will find that you are not just improving your health, you are strengthening your friendships in a way that happens only when you are both moving toward the same horizon. But I must offer a warning. Do not fall into the trap of overdoing it. Do not let your worth be dictated by a pace or a distance. We live in an age where we are tempted to let Strava be the only reason we move, performing for an audience of digital kudos. Do it for you and only for yourself. Running should be a sanctuary, not a chore. If you find yourself obsessed with the numbers to the point of misery, you have let a pleasure turn into a poison. Sometimes, the best run you can do is a recovery run straight to your couch. It is okay to rest. Having great goals is amazing, but do not let them build a prison around you. You are the runner, not the prisoner. Look out your window right now. Check the weather, dress accordingly, and get ready. You do not need the perfect plan. You just need to start. Lao Tzu famously said that the journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step, but you actually have to take that step. It is the hardest one you will ever take because it is the one that requires the most courage. Start now, and do not wait too long. Otherwise, you will find yourself on your deathbed wishing you could run away from it. Acknowledgements. A special thanks to the Prague running crew. You are doing God's work for many of us, runners. Especially, thank you to the core team and the pacers for leading the way. It is not just a crew, it is a family for many of us. I also want to thank Marta for providing the tools and the space to help me unpack the baggage I was trying to outrun. And last but not least, I want to thank Juan-Wisa for being my everything. About the author. Dmitri Fantski is the pen name of Dmitri Zimbru. A writer with a background in French literature and prose, he has transitioned from the world of words to the world of miles. His complete body of work, ranging from his earlier French writings to his current projects, is available on Amazon under the name Dmitri Fantski. Running Away from Myself is his latest exploration of the intersection between physical endurance and the human spirit.